So here's what I'm looking for with this video as well as the ones that follow. I want you to be ready to pause the video and just think through some of the things that I want you to be thinking about when you see these kinds of problems. So for example, part of the quiz that you're going to have on Thursday, you're going to have to be able to solve a quadratic. So part of the unit 2 is solving quadratic equations, and in the real number system as well as the complex number system. So when you see these three equations here, you've got three equations. Two of them are in standard form. These guys are in standard form. This one is not in standard form, but they are all quadratic equations. So one of the things that you should be thinking about is, well, why are they quadratic? And what makes them quadratic? And then what kinds of things do you know about solving quadratics? So with solving quadratics, a couple things you know. So we think about, what do you know? Well, you know that quadratic functions are shaped like that. When you find solutions to quadratic equations, what you're really doing is you're finding the x-intercepts. And sometimes there could be two x-intercepts. Sometimes there could be, I'll just use the same color. Sometimes there could be no x-intercepts. And sometimes there could be one x-intercept. And how you solve quadratic equations is you want to get them in standard form. So I had to pause the recording, so I don't really remember what exactly I just said. But when you solve a quadratic equation, what you should be thinking is you've got to get the equation in standard form. And then once you get the equation in standard form, you have to ask yourself, well, can I factor it? And then set the factors equal to 0. Do I have to use the quadratic formula? And then if you use the quadratic formula, then you can use the quadratic formula on any equation. So you just basically have to determine which method you're going to use, quadratic formula or factoring. And there is one other kind of quadratic equation in which you have ax squared, and there's no b in there's no linear term in the equation. So without a linear term, we can always just go ahead and solve for the x squared. So you can do ax squared equals negative c, x squared equals negative c over a, and then you can take the square root of both sides. So that's always an option, but again, the quadratic formula will work with any quadratic equation, solving any quadratic equation. So here's what I want you to do. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can solve all three of these equations. And then when you return, I will work through, you'll see me work through the solutions, and you can fast forward to the end and see if you get the same exact solutions that I got. So pause the video now. And on this one here, for this first equation, we have our A, our B, and our C. I would have already determined that we cannot factor this. So if we can't factor it, then we're going to solve by using the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b, the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. And then, so the b value is 2. And so the 2 goes there and there. And then the a value is 1. And the c value is 6, all over 2 times 1. And then once we get to there, we know that we can go ahead and simplify this guy right here. That's called the discriminant. And either way, we have x equals negative b, negative 2, plus or minus. Now, 2 squared is 4, so we have 4 minus 4 times 6. 4 times 1 times 6 is 24. So we have 4 minus 24 under the radical, so we have negative 20 under the radical, all over 2. Now, when we get the square root of negative 20, we should know that the square root of negative 20 is 2i radical 5. So I want you to make sure you figure that out. And I'll give you a little quick tutorial on that. The square root of negative 20 is the square root of, we always know we can pull an I out. So a negative inside means an I outside. So I radical 20, and radical 20 can be written as 2 times 10, 2 times 5, and when we have two 2's inside, we get 1 2 outside. So that means 2i, 2 times I, so the 2 comes out, the I is already out there, and we're left with 5 underneath the radical. That's where that guy comes from right there. Okay? So that's how we get 2i radical 5. So that's part of the process of being able to solve a quadratic equation. And then we can see we can factor out that's a bad equal sign. We can factor out a 2 from the numerator. We get negative 1 plus or minus I radical 5 all over 2. And then we should know that the 2's cancel. And we just get, we get negative 1 plus or minus radical 5 times I. So that is the A plus BI form of the solutions to the quadratic equation. So those are the two solutions, and those are the complex solutions to the quadratic equation. I'm going to pick up the next two in the next video.